I'll tell you a story, if I may. Many years ago, when I first came to Glasgow, I was at Glasgow Uni. I was late. I'm always late, naturally. And I was due to give a lecture. And one of the security guards who worked there started up a conversation with me and wanted to know where I was from. So I told him I was from Glasgow. And that answer didn't satisfy him, naturally. "Where are you really from?" he said. And I said, "Glasgow," again. He became agitated. "I was born in France." Silence. "I was born in Lyon." Still nothing. None of these answers satisfied him. So he said, "Where was your father born?" "My father was born in Lyon." And I could see, but I didn't understand it, that he was growing more and more annoyed at me. And so he became more and more impatient. "Where was your mother born?" he said. "So she was born in Ainty-Mouchet." "Ainta?" "Yes," I said. And then he said, "That's not it. Where are you from?" And I began to get it. "Well," I said, "my mother was born in Ainty-Mouchet, my father was born in Lyon, I was born in Lyon, but then I grew up in Dunblane." "Oh my God, so were you in that school where—" "It's also where Andy Murray's from," I interrupted, "and he's doing great. He's like a tennis champion now." He sighed and then said, "But I mean, where are you really from?" And I had to say, "I'll be from wherever you want me to be from." My answers had angered him. "I'm from planet Earth," I said, and I could see that he did not believe me. I tried to explain, that it wasn't as simple as one answer. Besides, I've never been there, so it wouldn't tell you anything more about me. If I were originally from Dakar or from anywhere else in Africa, it still wouldn't have been enough for him, because my family's entry into Scotland is a number of complex letters and applications to the Home Office. And that stops you from really getting into it. At some point in our history, I became Scotland's resident immigrant, a half-caste. If I was in France, I would be a bledad. If I was in Algeria, I would be an abid. If I was in the US and many other places, I would be somebody's nigger.
Now, that really can't be considered, my fault. It can't be considered the fault of the bouncer in the art school either. That he doesn't know that I'm late and don't have the time to get into it, nor is it any of his business. And I tell you that story to dramatise the nature of the distance created deliberately. Because when I became the resident immigrant, half-caste, bledar, abed, somebody's nigger, it's also very important to point out I was made by another whose language I did not speak. We did not know each other. We were shipped, cargo, forced into lorries, stopped at border patrols, processed, checked and strip searched just in case I was a terrorist, handcuffed to another person from another colony. And we could not speak to each other because if we could have spoken to each other, we might have been able to figure out what was happening to us. And if we could have figured out what was happening to us, we might have been able to prevent it. We would have had, in short, a kind of solidarity, which is a kind of identity, which might have made the history of slavery, colonisation, occupation, war, and post-colonialism, which might have made the history very different. Well, it didn't happen, and here we are. One of the most terrible things, one of the most difficult things, because it's something which one has but wants to resist, is also to use, is the fact that whether I like it or not, I have a paper that says indefinite leave to remain. That is not. I'm not your typical Brit. I'm not saying I'm Andy Murray, Mo Farah, or Zaha Hadid. I don't mean that. They laugh. I mean something very different. But I do mean that I was formed in a certain crucible. My school really was the streets of Glasgow. My frame of reference was Lemmy and Nicola Sturgeon, Simple Minds and the Cocteau Twins, Rabbie Burns and William Wallace, Mary Queen of Scots and It Wasn't Us. But I was a child and child with their eyes in the world. They use what they see. They have nothing else to use.
And you are formed by what you see, in the choices that you have to make, in the way you discover what it means to be black in Glasgow. I don't know how you discover what it means to be black in London or Paris or Jerusalem, but I know what it means, how you discover that in Glasgow, and then throughout the entire country. And I know how, as you grow older, you watch in the richest cities in the world, and the most famous, the richest, freest nations in the world, in the Western world. I know how you watch as you grow older, literally. Now this is not a figure of speech. The corpses of your siblings and your mothers and fathers, your grandparents and your cousins pile up around you, and not for anything they have done. They were too oppressed to have done anything. In any case, too vulnerable. But what one does realise is that when you try to stand up and look the world in the face, like you had a right to be here, when you do that, without knowing this is the result of it, you have attacked the entire power structure of the Western world. If I one fine day discover that I had been lied to all the years of my life, and my mother and my father were being lied to, if I discovered that in fact, though I was bred and bought and sold, shipped like property, left to die or drown or starve or serve, that I never really was an object, if I discovered that I was never really happy or free, picking all that cotton, building your museums, your roads, your culture, your cities, driving your buses and digging in all those mines to keep the rich rich and the rest of us deceived. And if I discovered that those heavenly dreams we had of safety in cities with streets that were paved with gold were not just the innocent expressions of third world peoples, but extremely difficult, dangerous and tragic expressions of what it feels like to be dehumanized.
Then by one's presence, simply, by attempting to walk from here to there, you have begun to frighten the white world. They have always known of your humanity. They have always known that no one wishes to be oppressed, misidentified, abused, targeted, beaten, left, imprisoned, killed. They have always known that the bales of cotton and the tobacco trade, the shipbuilding and bricklaying, the entire city of Glasgow built on black labor, that the black was not doing it out of love. We were doing it under the whip, the threat of the gun, and the even more desperate and subtle threat of the Bible. Now, then, the world is watching, according to me, in the streets of Syria and Palestine and Libya and Kenya, what must be considered is a final act of the white, Western, capitalist, colonial, patriarchal drama. Speaking as a human being, reading the news, and looking at the pictures, the streets of Gaza resemble nothing so much to me as the streets of North Kensington and Dungavel. And in both cities, precisely the same war is being waged. That war may yet spread to engulf the globe. And let's speak plainly. We know, everybody knows, no matter what the professions of my unhappy country may be, that we are not bombing people out of existence in the name of freedom. If it were the freedom we were concerned about, then long ago we would have done something about Grenfell. If we were concerned with freedom, boys and girls would not, as I stand here, be perishing in the streets of Gowan Hill.
We are concerned with power, nothing more than that. And most unluckily for the Western world, has consolidated its power on the backs of people who are going to die rather than be used any longer. In short, the economic arrangements of the Western world prove to be too expensive for most in the world, and the Western world will change these arrangements, or these arrangements will be changed for them. This is what is beneath all the rhetoric of all those rather shameful speeches coming from Theresa May. This imposes on us, then, a very considerable burden. I, for example, do have, in principle, at least the choice of, how can I put it, becoming a good citizen. I can make a living. Yes, I could. I'm well enough known to be a token. In short, I could ally myself on the side of what I most seriously consider to be a criminal nation. But if I can't do that, then I have to examine all the reasons that I can't and find out in myself precisely the terms of my connection with other people. One has tried, I have tried, for a long time in my own person, in the things I wrote, in the things I said. I don't mean that I was alone. I'm using myself as an example to convey to the world, white and black, rich and poor, and everything in between, the nature of our danger and where we are going to go. If we could not resolve the situation in our houses and on our streets and in our cities, folk refuse to speak about what's hiding in plain sight, racism. The truth is, throughout, although a kingdom, the UK has never been white, or has it been united? Not like it thinks it is. And every other person is here because you were there. And we know what happened, and we know who had the whip.
Well, if the day comes when you realise, and you don't want to realise it, that you cannot make yourself heard, that the people who you are addressing a plea, for them and for you, the plea is a very simple one. It's saying, look at it, forget all the mountains of nonsense that have been written and everything that's been said, forget the migrant crisis, don't write any immigration acts. We had that. They're called the Windrush generation. They're in the Immigration Act of 1973. What you have to look at is what is happening in this country. And what is really happening is that teachers are grassing on children in the name of prevent. Mothers are being deported or left to die in detention centres. Parents are letting their white children die rather than be treated by a black or a Muslim doctor. Families are living 10 to a room because while £1 million riverside development properties stand empty. It is not a racial problem. It's a problem whether or not you're willing to look at your life and be responsible for it, and then begin to change it. That great Western house I came from is one house, and I'm one of the children of that house. Simply, I'm the most despised child of that house.
And it's because the British people are unable to face the fact that I am flesh of their flesh, bone of their bone, created by them. My blood, my father's blood is in that soil. They can't face that, and that is why the city of London went up in flames. And that's why the cities of Homs and Aleppo are being destroyed under explosive barrels. Since 1942, you've been my relation. Yet still you do not know who I am, and I cannot marry your daughter or tell you where I'm from. I would have to be a much more stupid person than I am to believe you know anything at all about those people. In the Dabab, according to you, they liberated me before they got around to Kenya, and it was a liberation difficult to bear. Many didn't survive it. It seems to me, though, that really the difficulty that we face is first of all to excavate our actual history, and I'm a part of the history. I'm a part of the history which occurred in the Caribbean, the Americas, the Middle East, and Africa. And you're a part of the history which occurred in Gaza, and Yemen, and London, and India. One's got to find the terms, one's got to accept that, and find out how to use that.
And one has got to decide, I think, that the actual and the moral basis of which the world we now know rests are obsolete, must be changed. And as far as they are obsolete, they are wicked. As far as they are obsolete, they are oppressive. It is simply not conceivable that for another 500 years, or 200 years, or 100 years, that the blacks of East Africa, for example, should live and die in the camps, being treated like animals to make other people rich. Very simply, not the civilization which is doing this, by doing this, dooms itself. It is not possible to agree with it, nor is it possible to compromise with it. Freedom is a much overused word.
And it may not be as real as slavery, which is a very concrete thing, but freedom is what one's after. And as it cannot, I suppose, be given, then it obviously must be taken. There are many ways to take it. But before we can discover this, we have to discover how to unite ourselves. And the terms on which we can speak to each other, the terms on which, in fact, to put it bluntly, we can plot against the master. And lest anyone misunderstood me, I am not really talking about color. I'm not talking about race. I don't really believe in race. I don't really believe in color, but I do know what I see. I do know that in the very same way that colonialism menaced everybody in the country, and now it is visible.
So what happened at Grenfell is perfectly logical, and the lesson is plain. What happened says, if I can't live in this city, you can't live in this city either. When a tower in the city burns, everybody in the city is burning. If I can't walk out and buy a loaf of bread safely, neither can your child. That's why they're on the range learning how to shoot a pistol in the land of the free and the home of the brave. They're confusing themselves, but we know who's in the streets. We know to whom we are referring when they talk about crime in the streets. We know the son of Prince William won't be in the streets. Only one person is going to be in the streets, and that's me. And they're plotting to shoot me in the name of freedom, dignified by the law. And I'm supposed to agree. I'm supposed to agree. Nah, mate. I won't be raising your children no more. Alas, the party is over. The question is, what should we do? Everybody knows the question. It's in everyone's lap, from London to Glasgow and beyond. Everyone knows it. They're trying to figure out what to do. We should all figure out what to do. Thank you. And now,